So now, while that is melting, I will set up the third mold. And as you can see, I've already cut the wick using my ruler, and I measured it out to 15 centimeters. I've also already dipped it in the wax, so that this part, half of the wick, is stiff with 3 coatings of wax. This makes it easier for me to put the wick through the bottom of the mold, which, as you can see, I have also cleaned. So I put this mold inside the pitcher when the pitcher had no wax in it. And the wax melted off the bottom as it was sitting on the inside of the pitcher, and I had the heat on, and then I just wiped it clean with a paper towel. And you can see the bottom of the mold is perfectly clean. So now I insert the wick into the bottom of the mold, and I leave about 1.5 centimeters on the bottom. I push my plug into the bottom of the mold, into the hole, very tightly, and then I gently pull on the wick as I push on the plug to make sure that it is very well sealed, very tight. And I hold it up to a light to see if there's any light coming through the hole, and there isn't. So I know that the plug is firmly in the bottom of the mold. I put it on the table to see if it's level and doesn't move, and it is. And so then I put the wick into the wick holder, and I adjust it so that the wick holder is in the center. I line up the blue lines. So we have marked these molds differently than the molds that you have before. As you remember, the molds had blue lines on the inside as well as on the outside. The new molds have only blue markings on the outside, not on the inside. This is because sometimes the blue markings on the inside of the mold made a blue streak on the outside of the candle. So centering the wick in the mold is a slightly different process than before. First, you make sure that the wick holder is on the middle ridge of each side. You'll see that there are 3 ridges on the wick holder. The middle ridge will help you center the wick from side to side. After you center it from side to side, then you align the blue lines on the wick holder and on the mold, as you can see here. Then you have centered it in both directions, this way and this way, and your wick is in the center of the mold. To make sure our new system for centering the wicks in the mold is clear, we'll show you a close-up. We show you this because we did find that some of the candles that were shipped during the pilot did not have the wicks centered. As you recall, we no longer have, on these new molds, a blue line on the inside of the mold. Therefore, we center it first by looking at the edges of the wick holder. There are 3 ridges, and we put the wick holder on the middle ridge on each side of the mold. This centers the wick from side to side. Then we line up the blue line on the bottom of the wick holder with a blue line on the outside of the mold. This centers the wick in the other direction. Remember that you should center the wick before pouring the wax, and then center it again after you've poured, using the same method as we described here. First, making sure that the wick holder is resting on the middle ridge on each end, and then lining up the blue line on the bottom of the wick holder on both sides with the blue line on the outside of the mold.